والTMA links وما إلى ذلك. بالإضافة طبعا إلى الفوريومز حسب ما اتفقنا إن شاء الله إنه بيكون في يوم الجمعة في discussions على الفوريوم، حيكون مخصص للدiscussions على ال HTML coding. بعض الجزئيات اللي متعلقة بلقاء الأمس اللي كانت ب creating and generating the forms for the sake of collecting the data، حنتعرف فيها وحنناقش فيها على المين HTML codes المستخدمة to generate the forms elements including the text boxes والradio buttons والcheck boxes وما إلى ذلك. حجاوبك الآن يا مريم. إن شاء الله بيكون في TMA discussion forum، بيكون إن شاء الله موضوع بعد ما نخلص المتر مباشرة. فأنا all what I want from your side for now is to focus on the midterm itself, please. So keep the TMA aside. Still, we have plenty of time, guys. The TMA submission date is like 23rd of July. So after the midterm, we will have like a whole 2 weeks to work on the TMA. We don't want to mix things together. Focus for now, focus on the TMA. On the midterm, sorry. It's 30 marks. And before we start, I just would like to confirm our extra meeting on Thursday. Okay? Our extra meeting is going to be on Thursday to cover part 3 and 4 from block 2. And Sunday, inshallah, we will be finishing block 2. So after that, you will free yourself for studying. يعني Monday ما حيكون في عندنا class يا جماعة. Okay? Monday, next week ما حيكون في عندنا class. ولكن حيكون في عندنا إن شاء الله review meeting say on Wednesday evening. So يوم الأربعاء إن شاء الله بالمساء بيكون في عندنا review class. But I would expect from all of you to be already finished the material. فبالتالي بعد محاضرتنا يوم الأحد please start preparing yourself for the midterm exam. On Wednesday evening we will dedicate the whole meeting 2 hours, complete 2 hours for reviewing the material quickly and to solve some previous exams. As for the previous exams, I will provide you inshallah with like 3 to 4 previous exams. Usually the pattern will be the same. نمط الأسئلة حيكون the same. So after you finish reading, please start solving the midterm exam, the previous midterm exams. For today, we will start inshallah with block 2, covering part 1 and part 2. Block 2 generally it's talking about the software architecture, and in particular here we are talking about the web application software architecture. Now what does the architecture in general means? You have an idea? What do we mean generally by the software or the architecture, not the software architecture? Like the organization, المعمارية, yes, it could be. Building blocks, how the building or how this product is being built, what are the components, how they are related to each other. The answer is yes. So the architecture in general, it's describing the structure of a product, شكل البرودكت, by describing the main components and how these main components are related to each other. Because at the end, the system, as we agreed previously, the system is like an assemble of different components. وعبارة عن تجميع لمجموعة components. Now the architecture, we are describing the structure of the system, how the different components are working together. What is the relation between them? So the architecture in general is taking to relate to the style and the structure of buildings. And in the software, it's like taking the structure of the software component and the relation among them. طبعا of course in this block we are talking about the architecture of the web applications in terms of the structure. The structure could be describing both the hardware and the software. It's very important before you build any application, whether it's web or standalone application, to decide what are the required hardware and the software and the other details associated with these two things. Now, one of the people who's interested in this field, his name is Shaw and Gardner. They have like an article that summarizes the various interpretation فسروا أو وضعوا في هذا الارتيكل مجموعة تفسيرات on what do we mean by the software architecture, and they stated that the architecture of a software system defines the system in terms of the computational components. Now, each system comprises a number of components, and each component is responsible to perform some kind of computations. So all of those components together, the description of all of those components will describe the software architecture. And of course, how these components are interacted with each other. Here, what I mean by components, the software modules, the software different modules, starting from the presentation, the interface, until the data tier, the place where the data is being stored. So between these two ends, there are so many components. In software architecture for developers, one of the authors, his name is Brown, he wrote an article in 2010, and he described the software architecture in a more widely shape, and he said that the software architecture basically comprises four things. Software architecture could be defined by defining four different things. One, the structure itself, which is building the blocks. What are the main components and how these components are related to each other. Once again, مثل ما حكينا إنه أي application أو software system is comprises a number of modules, number of parts, or in other words, number of subsystems. Now, what are these subsystems and how they are interacting with each other? And then it's said that the foundation, which is the stable basis in which to build something, some main facts and concepts about the software that we are going to build. The infrastructure services. The infrastructure services in a real estate building, it means like the cooling, the heating, and the powering. But in the software system, we meant by the infrastructure by the security issues, the performance, the error handling, and so on. And finally, it's the vision, which is like a very crucial thing that to understand what it is you are building and how that process will be undertaken, which is like the procedures of the system, how it's going to perform the different tasks. So by defining all of these factors, really you are defining the software architecture. The software architecture could be like the blueprint of the software. Now, what does the blueprint means? It's like by drawing of the building, how it looks like, the rooms, the floors, the shapes, the interior, the exterior. This is like the blueprint. The same with the software, we have like a blueprint for the software, which is like some technical drawings. There are different approaches to architecture, and here we are investigating two main of them. طبعا there are like four different software architecture, including the peer-to-peer, client-server, software-oriented architecture, and the cloud. Now, what are the main differences between them, and which one of them we are going to discuss in this meeting? In this meeting, we are going to discuss two of them, the client-server and the service-oriented architecture, which is where the cloud is part of it. Now, what does the client-server architecture means? We have a software, and the architecture for this software is built to be as a client-server application. This means, guys, and we have two parties. The client, who are the users who used to browse the interface and send some requests, and the server, which is the back end, who's going to respond back to you. Like, for example, when you get into SIS and try to retrieve your marks, you are the client, and the server, AOU server, will be responsible to retrieve your marks as a report and display them in front of you. If we are go more further or deeper levels in the business side, they are, here I'm talking about the big businesses. They are not using the client-server architecture. They're using different kind of architecture, which is like distributed over network, which is such as service-oriented architecture, SOA. We will discuss these two architectures further, inshallah, in the coming slides. So what we are going to discuss here is two forms of architecture, SOA and client server. Now, we are hearing some terminologies like multi-tiers, 2 tiers, 3 tiers, 4 tiers. What does it mean? Do you have an idea? Well, this is like a property for the client-server architecture. It has multiple forms, starting from 2 tiers, which is the more simple form of the client-server architecture, and ended with n tier. The n could be any number, 3, 4, 5, depends on how complex. You are asking the question in the wrong time, محمد يزن. الدرجات إن شاء الله يوم الجمعة بإذن الله تعالى 2nd of July or 3rd of July at most will be inshallah displayed. So again, the client server architecture has many forms, as we said. The simplest one is the 2 tier. The 2 tier, which is like a simple client server architecture, where all of the processing load and the application is being hosted on the server, and the processing load will be only on the server. On the other hand, there is the client, who is just a user who can browse the interface and request some requests from the server. The server in turn will respond it back to you. This is like the simplest form of the client server, which is the 2 tier. And here in this case, the server part provide the whole functionality. So all of the functions and the implementation things are done on the server only. Any number of clients, 2, 3 or more clients, they can connect to the server and make use of the application which is hosted on that server and start requesting some files, some data from there, and of course the server will respond back to you. One of the improvements that might be split the application into two parts. One part is the client, which provide the interface of the users, and the other part is the backend, which is the server where the application is hosted. This is like a figure to describe the simple client server architecture. Please have a look on it. As you can see, this is the client. Who is the client in this case, guys? And when the server look at the clients, their clients, they are treating each client as a browser. So for you as a user, when you try to access the server, you access the server through the browser. So the browser is treated as a client in this case. But of course, you are accessing the server or the application through what? Through the internet connection, through the network. This is the simple client-server architecture, which is called also by the 2 tier. 2 tiers means, guys, levels. The simple client-server architecture, we can call it by either simple client-server architecture, or we can call it by the 2 tier, 2-level architecture, where only we have two parties, the client and the server. The web browser client in the example of for example, if we take an example, what the client could be. For online banking, it simply could be like a user requesting some details of his bank account, and the browser in this case will connect to the server requesting some data, and the server will respond back by displaying some information or data in front of you as a web pages. Sometimes the browsers themselves, they could be either thin clients or thick clients. Do you have an idea about these two terminologies? What are the main differences between them? Thin and thick clients. Well, this has nothing to do with the browser itself. It has something to do with the architecture, on how that application is being performed. Like for example, when you try to access your SIS, what do you think? Are you thin client or thick client? Okay, why, Aisha, you said thick? Thick means you are do like a part of the processing. But in reality, we are not doing any part of the processing. When you are accessing your SIS, you are just retrieving some data and displaying to your web screen. So you are just displaying data. So there is no processing. You are just sending requests and the server will process your request and send back to you by the results. So it's like a thin. But sometimes when you go to some applications, that applications will allow you to manipulate some data. Like for example, if you go to one of the e-commerce websites and try to submit an order, your browser might do some calculations. Like for example, when you go to Amazon.com, you have like what? Shopping cart, right? So whenever you add a new item to the shopping cart, the total price will be changed. Will be changed only in your screen, which means you as a client, you are doing a part of the processing. So in this case, if you are doing part of the processing, you call by thick clients. So the thin and the thick clients, it has something to do with the processing load, whether you are doing some processing, some functions from your side as a client or not. If not, then you are thin. If you are do some functions, then you are thick client. Now, in order to change from the Internet browser, the Internet Explorer to Mozilla or Safari or any other kind of browsers, this is like just a personal preferences. So the applications should be able to work on all kind of browsers, because at the end of the day, the server is treating the browsers as a client, regardless to which browser you are using. Making the web application client-specific more tightly couples to the client and the server, and generally is not a good decision. So loosely coupled means regardless with which browser you are using, the service will be displayed to you in either ways. Okay, so this is like the simplest form of the client server, which is the two-tier. Sometimes if you are dealing with more advanced or embedded systems or critical systems, the processing load will be very high, and the number of forms and the screens will be also huge, as well as the data will be huge because the number of clients are huge. So in this case, it's highly recommended to go further and divide the architecture into further tiers. Like for example, we might have multi-tier architecture. It could be 3 tiers, 4 tiers, and so on. Now, when I say that our software architecture now is a simple client server, 2-tier, what does it mean? Means all of the application, all components of the application that we are using, including the interface, the business logic, the presentation engine, and the database, all of them, they are being stored in one server. Is that correct? Because you are dealing with one server only. Okay, now what about if we are dealing with like a more complex system where the number of the users are huge and the data also is huge? In this case, we need to further divide the architecture into more tiers. Like for example, the application itself, the interface of the application or the presentation logic could be stored in a server. The business logic itself, which is including the methods and the classes and the modules, are stored in another server. A third server could store the databases themselves. So in this case, if we have 3 servers and 1 client, this is called by how many tiers? 4 tiers, Muhammad. 4. Because the client is 1 tier, 1 level, and we have our application hosted on 3 different servers. The interface on a server, the business logic on another server, and the database on a third server. So 3 servers and 1 client, this is like a 4 tier. Is that correct? This is like this is an example on a 4 tier 4-tier architecture. As you can see, the client server or the client browsers, they are like 1 tier. The web server, where the interface and the presentation logic is being stored. The business logic, which is the procedures and the functions and the methods are stored. And the database server. So 1, 2, 3 plus 1, these are 4. So this is like an example on 4-tier layers. We call them by client tier, server tier, middle tier, and data tier. Now, what does the server tier means? What is being hosted on the server tier? The interface itself, the packages. So do you know the interfaces and the packages, what they mean? So these are the things, the two things that are being stored on the server tier itself. Now, how the methods are working and the components and the modules and the classes, they are stored on the business logic. These are the business logic. And finally, the databases, the place where your data is being stored and retrieved, is stored on a third server. طبعا, the more tiers you have in your architecture, this means the more processing load. And of course, it will affect the performance at the end. This is the client server. So the client server, it's like basically where the clients are the browsers used to request some data or functions from the server. The server will respond back. Sometimes, if you are dealing with more complex applications, then it's highly recommended to further subdivide the server into subservers. And this is the example on how we can divide the server into subservers. The other kind of the architecture is the software-oriented architecture. Did you cover T215A? هل انتهيتوا من مادة T215A? Okay. The service-oriented architecture has been covered in details there. Do you remember it? Do you remember that? Okay. Since the majority of you have covered the T215, don't worry, Adel. We will go through it again today, Akid. Okay, since the majority of you have covered the service-oriented architecture, can you please give an example on a web application that's implementing this architecture? Give us an example on one of the web applications that employing the service-oriented architecture. Okay. What about Amazon.com? What do you think, Amazon.com? Which architecture is being used in Amazon.com? You know why, Muhammad? How can you explain to us why? Don't know. Okay. Now, usually, as we said, when the business become or the application become more complex and more than two parties are involved, then the service-oriented architecture will come. Basically, the service-oriented architecture is enabling you as a client to discover or to explore a directory of services. And each service is being connected with a different party. Like, for example, for Amazon.com, you can find anything you can imagine in Amazon.com. Is that correct? Including entertainment, softwares, books, furnitures, spare parts, car spare parts, everything you can imagine, you can find it on Amazon.com. Now, what do you think? Is Amazon.com that big business that deal with all of these stocks? The answer is no. But they have like partners. Like, for example, Muhammad Yazan, He's a specialist in the car spare parts. So he has like a link inside Amazon.com. For example, Adil, he's like concerning with the furnitures. So he has a link inside Amazon.com. So for me as a client, or for Aisha as a client, whenever she would like to search for something, she will explore something called directory. Okay, directory. So from there, she can search for any service she wants. Once she found the service, then the service will be called from the corresponding provider. Okay, Aisha, she was searching for furniture, so we will link Aisha with whom? With Adil. Adil, he's like another business, complete separate business, but he's joining Amazon.com. So this is the main concept of the service-oriented architecture. It has like 3 levels of performing the transaction. 1, the requester, who are the clients that can both search and discover the web services. 2 is the directory or the registry that holds all of the details of the web, where you can find all of the services and description for each service. 3, the services themselves. And here we mean by the services the providers, like Muhammad Yazan and Adil. They are 2 different providers. They have 2 different and distinct businesses, their own businesses. So whenever Aisha choose one of the service, Amazon.com will link you with that service. This is like a blueprint of how the service-oriented architecture looks like. The requesters, who are the requester? The clients, exactly. Now, what is the best you can do? Can you search the services, or you can only access the directory? You can only access the directory, the place where all of the services are there, so you can explore them and find them. So once you choose one of the services, the web will link you to the service itself. Now, what this requester can do, can find and search for the services in the directory. What the service can do, they can publish some information about their services. There is no server here, Aisha. Here we are accessing the directory. You as a requester, you are accessing the directory. And blindly, you will access the server. What do you mean by blindly? You don't know who is the provider. You know only one party. You know Amazon.com only. Amazon.com will link you to the service provider. You will not be aware about who is the service provider. So it will look like that Amazon is providing the service, while in fact Amazon is not. Somebody else is providing the service. Can you please give me another example? No, Yahya. The directory will enable you to search for a service. فقط مثل directory, just like Yahoo directories. Yes, it is the third party, Muhammad. Give me another example of application, web application is using service-oriented architecture. eBay is a third party, Aisha, is a part of the architecture. But here I'm talking about complete example of SOA architecture. Okay, so this could be, yes. What about Yahoo directory? Yahoo. Yahoo is a web service, right? It's a website from where you can explore many services. Do you know Yahoo directory, which is like the directory at the right side, from where you can narrow the search? Like for example, if you are looking for a private hospital in Riyadh, you will go to the directory, to the Yahoo directory, health, hospitals, choose the country Saudi Arabia, you choose the city Riyadh, and then you will be able to see many services, many private hospitals. From there you can choose one of the hospitals. This is also like another example of service-oriented architecture. Okay, now in order to find the service on the web as you as a requester, the requester must know the location or the URL, for example, for the directory. So all what you need to have for you as a requester is the address of the directory. Like for example, Amazon.com. This is the address of the directory. And then you can search or explore the directory, the services inside that directory. Now what's inside the directory, guys? There are the services along with like a description for each service. Now who published or who put the description for each service? Amazon.com itself? No, the providers. Each provider, he has an access on his page, on its page, where he can like put some details about his or its service. So that's why we mentioned in the figure that the service, they can access the directory for the sake of what? For the sake of publishing their description or the description of their services. So you as a requester, you access the directory, you search for a service. Now once you find the service, the directory will provide you with a description of that service, where it's like located on what? On a network, on the internet, and how to use the service, and then the requester can then make a connection to what? To the service itself, to the service provider, I mean. Now, the web service architecture implemented in the software-oriented architecture is compromises 4 different layers. يعني حتى نشتغل أو حتى نطبق in order to employ the service-oriented architecture, we need to implement 4 levels, 4 layers. The first layer, which is the network transport layer, and this layer is supporting message passing between the components, the different components in the architecture, including the requester, the directory, and the service providers or the services themselves. And this is done through what? Which protocols? Depends. If it's like an email service, then you are using simple mail transfer protocol. If you are like, for example, using text pages or web pages, then you are using HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. If you are like using or browsing files, then you are using FTP, File Transfer Protocol. This is the network layer, which is concerned with passing the messages between the different components or the different parts of that architecture. 2, message encoding layers, which is provides you a standard approach to encode the information in the messages, because the message exchanging is being done in coded way. It will be encrypted and secure. So it's very important to be able to encode those messages so that they can be understood by the different parties, those people who are going to read the content. Now, web service messaging approach, such as XML, service-oriented architecture protocol, and XML itself. So all of these will help you for message encoding. The third layer, which is like the description of the service description layer. This provides a way to describe a web service which is available inside a directory so that it can be accessed and used by the requester. In this case, we are using what? We are using like a special language. We called it by the WSDL, which is like the web service description language. This language is being used by the providers to describe their services, which is available inside the directories. And finally, we have the service discovery layer, which is to provide the means to publish the description and to find the web services. So for the provider, in order to publish their services, they are using the universal description and integration, which is like standard and short-written by UDDI. These 4 layers are termed in the web service protocol stack. So what do we need to understand from this subject, guys? All what you need to do to know is that the software architecture, they are coming in many kind of architectures. Here we are concerning with two architectures only, the client server and the service oriented architecture. Now, how the client server architecture is working, the application is hosted on a server, and the client who used to request some information and services from that server only. The server could be divided into further subservers in case if the business or the web application is used. For the most complex or more complex applications and the embedded systems, we are using the service-oriented architecture where many parties are involved and all of the services are being collected in one directory. The requester can search and explore the directory, and then he can use the service, and the website in turn will connect you with that service provider. Now, to implement this, we need to have like 4 different layers, including the transport or the message passing, and this is using one of the internet protocols like HTTP, FTP, and SMTP, and then the message encoding, and this is done by XML and some kind of protocols like service-oriented architecture protocol, and then the providers, they need to be able to describe their services through a special language called web service description language. And finally, for the providers, in order to be able to publish their services in the directory, they need to use the UDDI standard. So this is like a figure describing the service-oriented architecture, which has like 4 different layers. The service directory, which is using like UDDI, and the service description, WSDL, and messaging between the different parties or the components of the architecture using XML and some kind of protocols. And finally, the message passing between the components. So these are the different layers. The web service operations, in general, if we are using a service-oriented architecture, we are using or operating some services, and these services involve the following processes. 1. Publish the service description, of course. Now, what is the content of the directory? The services along with the description for each service. So the description needs to be published by the providers. So the requester or the service client wanting to access the service first need to know what is the nature and the details of that service, which is inside the directory of the service. The search request, this is another operation or process. The first step for the client is to send the request to the directory for details of appropriate web services. So what's happening in the reality for you as a requester, when you explore the directory, once you find the suitable service, you will send to the server to provide you with a description of that service, the details of that service. And request the service, the client choose the service as a preferred. So which services you have choose, I choose that service, so the client will choose the service from those available and makes a request to the server. Now, who's in charge now? The service provider itself. So the service will be respond back to you through the service provider by releasing like some details, some further details about their services and the products. So you can proceed from there. The properties for the service-oriented architecture, it compromises a number of properties. So each service-oriented architecture model with its published, find, and bind operations. Publish means the providers will publish the description of their services on the directory. The requester will find, and the requester will be linked or connected to the service provider. These are the main 3 operations in the service-oriented architecture. Now, what are the properties? The properties could be summarized into the following 4 different properties. 1. Not all of the services used in a process may be provided by the organization or third-party services can be included in a process. For example, exchange service providing by a bank by converting some cost. So some services, they are already available and they are not linked to a third party. Services, they are called only at the point of the time when they are needed. So, and this is called by just-in-time services. So all of the services are idle unless you request one of the services, you as a requester. Once you choose, once you find and choose a service, then the service will be displayed to you. So all of the services are being idle, خاملين, unless you request one of them. And finally, whichever the case, the fallback service or failover facility provides some redundancy and allow the application to be more robust, strong, and reliable. So of course, it should be like reliable service, a web service application. The message passed between the client and the server are often encoded. Of course, they are not traveled in a plain way as simple object access protocol, the SOAP. This is for the service-oriented architecture. Okay, another form of the service-oriented architecture is the cloud. Now, what is your understanding of the cloud? What do you know about cloud? The cloud architecture could be summarized in one word, guys. It's like virtualization. Virtualization. Like, for example, you feel as a user, yeah, virtual servers. In reality, you are dealing with virtual servers. What does the virtual servers means? Like, for example, we have three guys here. We have Muhammad Yazan and Adil Kamal and Ali and Mahmoud. Four guys. The four guys, they are hosting their applications on a remote server. Now the question is, they know that there are somebody else are sharing the service facilities along with them? No. They expect that the server is dedicated for them, but in the reality, they are using like part of the server facilities. So for the server owners, why do they need to dedicate the whole server for you, since you are using like 25% of the service facilities? So in turn, they will rent the server for another four guys. So in reality, you are four are using the server, and each one of you is feeling that the server is serving him only. So that's why we call it by virtual servers, because all of you are using like a remote virtual server. Now, the virtual servers could be used for what? Could be used for hosting applications, or it could be used for what? As a storage, where you can store your data. Just like as a simple application on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone, there is like an iCloud. The iCloud or OneDrive, the iDrive will enable you to store your data on a server, on a cloud, on somewhere else. So anything being used by you, not stored in your PC or on your device, this is called by cloud computing. Google Drive is another example of cloud. Exactly. What else? Dropbox? Yes, Dropbox is another cloud. So you have an access in Dropbox server and you are storing the service. Now what do you think? How many users are using the Dropbox server? Is that only you using the Dropbox server? No, there are many. But you feel that it's your own server. That's why we call it by the virtualization. So the cloud architecture, cloud means virtual servers are made available and used over the internet. So you are accessing those servers remotely. But more generally, the cloud is seen as consisting of a wide range of different resources, like storage resources, functioning resources, monitoring resources, hosting resources. Now, the National Institute of Standards, the NIST, provided like a wider definition of the cloud computing. This is like a specialized institution concerning with the technology and the standards. The NIST is defining the cloud computing as the cloud computing is a model of enabling more convenient and on-demand network access in order to share a pool of configurable computing resources. So, in order to reduce the cost, instead of having like a data center at your place, rather you just rent a server over the cloud where all of the services are ready, configurable. All what you need to do is just to access them and to use them. This is the cloud. The Web 2 and architecture. Web 2, it's like a newer version of the web, the regular web. Now, our understanding of the web is that it's like an interface, simple interface for the internet, enable us to use the internet services. Now, some applications nowadays, big applications actually, where the number of users are, I think they are billions, not millions, billions. لا أعلم إذا تعدى المليار عدد اليوزرز بالفيسبوك واللينكدين or not, but I think yes, it's exceeding this number. So such big applications and services like Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and the other social networking websites and web services, and also to improve the interactivity of the web. These advances have led to the labeling of the new era as a Web 2. So it's like not a regular websites. They are huge and intelligent websites where a huge number of users are connected to each other, a huge number of facilities and technologies are being used there. So there are so many technologies are used in Facebook. Can you please name some technologies employed by Facebook? Big data. Do you know what does the big data means? Where the size and the capacity of the data is huge. Big data means some web applications over the web used to collect and gather a huge amount of information. So the biggest site ever over the internet is collecting the data is the social networking websites. So the big data itself, it's a new technology. Now, what we can do with the big data? We can analyze the big data. We can do some kind of analysis on the big data, such as data mining. So we can know the behavior of the people in a country. We can know the behavior of a special level of people, like for example, the people at schools. What are their behaviors? So all of these things could be analyzed and collected and extracted from the pool of the data, which is the big data stored inside the Facebook. Also, some security issues, like for example, encryption. They are dealing with the companies, with the enterprises, like RSA, for example, to handle the encryption and the secure communication between the different parties of those social networking. And many other technologies, including the data mining, the data analytics, the big data, the encryption, the security. So all of these together, they are incorporating with each other in the social networking websites. This is one. Two, can we build a huge web applications such as Facebook by using the regular developing tools, like for example, Java, JavaScript? The answer is no, because it will not support all of these advances. Rather, there are some new tools have been evolved recently to help to achieve the Web 2 technologies, such as Ajax. Did you know Ajax? Like a web development tool. It's a very easy and almost everything is being done by wizard. Do you know what does by wizard means? Just like you select components, next, you build a website. This is like by wizard. Now, almost everything through Ajax is being done over as a wizard building. So that's why, as the business or the web applications are evolved, and the performance and the time are very important factors, then tools such as HTML, XML will not work sufficiently with us. Rather, we need to choose some advanced tools such as Ajax. Spelling of the Ajax, you mean? Yeah, it's already written in front of you, Amal. Okay, now by looking at the components of any web application and how they might be used in our architecture and how they are connected, we are moving from the high level, more abstract architecture toward more concrete implementation aspects to the top-down fashion. Like for example, in Figure 8, here we are like seeing the top-down refinement of architecture to implementation. So usually we define the architecture and then we design the components and the protocol required to build that system. And finally, we start implementing using the different languages. Now, what do you think when it comes to the implementation? You need to specify the languages. Now, as we agreed before, that the web application could comprise multiple levels, starting from the client to the server to the middle and to the data tier. Now, of course, at each level, there are some suitable and capable tools. Can you, for example, design or implement the business logic by using HTML? Of course not. The HTML and standards like HTTP and FTP could be used only on the client server. Why? Because the client tier, is not doing any kind of processing, just like displaying data and presenting the interface in front of you. So HTML will be enough because HTML is capable to do the design. But when it comes to the server, where you need to display some advances, so some IIS servers could be used. The middle tier where the business logic is there, we need to program these business logics. You need like an advanced programming languages such as PHP, ASP.NET, sometimes JavaScript. The data tier where the database is being stored, of course, the common tools for building databases are well known, just like MySQL, SQL Server, and so on. This is like a summary about the different tiers. When it comes to the client tier, we are using like the browsers, and the browsers they are mainly using like some HTML pages, and those pages which is like acting as an interface. The interface is linked with the business logic, which is like the procedures and the functions and the methods, which is being programmed by using sometimes JavaScript, PHP, or some advanced tools. And finally, the database tier or the data tier, where the database is created using some specialized software like MySQL. Okay, guys, so in summary, what we have discovered here or discussed here, we discussed the term architecture. What does the software architecture means? And then we went through a number of different forms of the software architecture, including the client server and the service-oriented architecture. And then we went more detailed in the service-oriented architecture, and we knew some new types such as cloud and Web2 architecture. So I hope everything is clear. It will not be clear from the first time. Of course, you need to go back and to read further in details. And in case if you have any doubt or question, please highlight it and keep it to our review sessions on Wednesday, inshallah. Should we move to the second part, or do you have any questions? Okay guys, الكلاس مش الأربعاء هذا. It's next week, Wednesday from the next week, which is the review class before the midterm exam. Our midterm exam is going to be Thursday next week. So before, one day before, we will have like a review class. So in case if you have any questions, leave them to the Wednesday, please. Okay, with regard to your question, Aisha, is it enough to study from the lecture notes only? Yes, if you understood the concept, no need to go further. If you get the idea on all of the topics mentioned or discussed in this lecture notes, I think then it will be enough. Depends. Okay, so guys, we ended up the first part by the multi-tier architecture, including the client tier, the server tier, the middle tier, and the data tier. Is that okay? The multi-tier architecture comprises 4 different tiers or 4 more tiers. Client tier, اللي هو الكلاينت level, server tier, middle tier, and data tier. Now, in order to implement the part of our application at each tier, we need to use like a suitable tool to do that. When it comes to the client side, what do you think? Which kind of tools we can use to implement the client tier? What we are doing in the client side? We are just displaying pages. Or in other words, we are like presenting the content of the web application. That's all. Or presenting the interface of the application. Is that correct? We are not doing that much processing load from the server side. So what do you think? Is it enough to use HTML? The answer is yes. Is it enough to use, like for example, JavaScript? It could be yes. Do we need to use ASP.NET? No, because it's like an advanced tool. No need. So for the second part, we are going to discuss the client side. What's happening in the client side? What are the properties of the client tier? And which tool we are going to use or we need to use? Plus, what are the main kinds of the clients? We already discussed this. How many different kinds of clients we have? 2. The thin and the thick. Now, what are the main differences between them? The differences depends on the processing load. If the client is doing any kind of a processing, then this is like a thick. If the client only representing the interface or downloading the interfaces from the server, then this is like a thin. So the thin is doing nothing, no processing load from the thin side. Okay, we will start with the thin client. Now, the thin client has a little internal logic, so it will not do very much work from its side and will perform only quite simple functions, just like submitting requests, displaying the features and the options on the interface. Like it is the browser, the client, it is the browser. But the client are coming into 2 types, thin and thick. طبعا it's not the client, not the browser itself. We are talking here about the application itself. Is that clear, Mariam? So the browsers, they are only browsers. There is no like thick browsers or thin browsers. We are talking about the client sides in a particular application. Like SIS, the clients they are thin. Amazon, the clients they are thick. This way. So the thin clients, they are using like or performing a quite simple functions, just like sending requests, receiving responses. Now, every operation on the client side is required a protocol, or it's being done over a protocol, either HTTP protocol or FTP or SMTP, depends on the nature of that application. So usually it's being done over or using a protocol by requesting by sending a request, and this request will be sent to the server that perform the operation. Like for example, when Maryam accessed her online banking, she sent a request to find or to retrieve like a count slip that summarizes all of the transactions done in the previous 3 months. So what you have done, Maryam, in this case, you just send a request. So you are a thin client. Now who's responsible to do the processing? Who's responsible to get back to you with a complete report after retrieving the data from the database? Is the server. So in this case, you are a thin client. This is like a blueprint of the thin client. The client is communicating with the server, who in turn will retrieve some data from the database and back to you with the response. On the other hand, the thick clients, they are some kind of clients that perform some amount of the processing from their sides. Okay, now as the thick clients perform much of the processing required, then the operation carried out on behalf of the user frequently do not require an interaction with the server. What do we mean here? Now, whenever you visit a website, please Amal, go ahead. Okay, and I thought you are going to explain it here. Of course, and according to your understanding, it will not be like marked literally as the answer key. As long as you are describing the idea in correct way, that's all. So guys, do not get out to get things like in complex way. Get it in a very simple way. The client side, the client tier, they are coming into two types, thin and thick. The thin, they are doing like much lower processing on their side, and the thick, they are doing some kind of a processing. Of course, Maryam, the thick clients, they are doing part of the processing. Well, I can give me an example, please. Now, whenever you visit a website, okay, whenever you are using a website, there is something is happening. What is that thing? You know the caching? The page will be cached. You know the cookies? Which is like files, text files stored in your browser. Those cached data or the cookies, they're including some data. So for the thick clients, they can do some processing depending on the cached data. So whenever we need to process something, no need to go back to the server again. So in this case, what do you think? What is the amount of the load on the server? Is it less or more? You are using like, or if you are implementing a thick client, the load on the server will be less or more? Be less, of course. Why, Maryam? Because you are doing most of the process. Most of the processing is being done from your side as a client. So the load will be less. So with regard to the cache عايشة. Now لما تفوتي على أي موقع بيصير في downloading للcontent لهذاك الموقع عندك على temporary internet files as cookies. And those cookies are being stored inside your browser. So next time you visit the same application, it will be displayed to you faster. صحيح يا جماعة؟ لأن جربوا ادخل على موقع لأول مرة حتلاحظوا إنه حياخذ منك وقت. ادخل عليه ثاني يوم حتلاقيه downloaded أسرع من المرة الأولى. ليه؟ لأنه most of the data has been cached in your desk already. Of course you can do, Amal. But this is the main difference between the thin and the thick. الفيجرز هنا مثلنا الثيك أو الثين بكلاينت رفيع إلى حد ما slim. and for the thick we represent it as a fat client, because like we are saying that the thick clients are doing part of the process. Okay, now any web application, as we said earlier, compromise, or any architecture is compromises what? A number of processes, such as presentation engine, presentation logic, business logic, and data. Now, regardless to which client we are dealing with, always the data tier is from the server side. So only what's distributed between the client and the server is three things: the presentation engine, which is the interfaces, plus the presentation logic, which is the component of the interface, including the menus, the tabs, the buttons, and some processing, which is presented by as a business logic. So this is like here we are representing the fit and the fac. If it's like fat, then it will include more processing. The fat clients, they are doing the presentation engine, presentation logic, and business logic. For the thin clients only, they are dealing with the presentation engines, just displaying data to you. I don't think so, Yahya. You are doing nothing from your side. When you are checking your online banking, you are doing nothing from your side. So you are thin, not thick. Sometimes when you order, yeah, it could be, Khalid, why not? Yani you just understand the concept, Khalid. Okay, now let us back to Yahya question. Now sometimes, Yahya, if you go to uh, pizzahut.com, okay, and you would like to order some meals from there, you'll be able to choose multiple meals. Is that correct? You can choose multiple meals. Whenever you choose a new meal, it will be added to the previous order, and the price or the total price will be changed. Is that correct? Now, who's doing the calculations? Is it the server? No, it's you. So in this case, you are a thick. Since you are doing like part of the processing, then you are a thick server, a thick client, sorry. So this is the basic idea. Programming languages types. Okay, the programming languages, they are coming into two main languages. You already discussed this in M1508. Did you remember the differences between the different kind of programming languages? There are two types: interpreted languages and compiled languages. Do you know the difference between them? Okay, please go ahead, Adil. Somebody know the difference? Just tell us, please. Let us start with the interpreted languages. Give you some hints. The interpreted languages, they are the scripting languages. Any scripting language is considered as interpreted language, like HTML, JavaScript, BASIC, Perl. All of these are interpreted. So the interpreted languages, as Khalid is saying, will use line by line, will be executed line by line, Khalid. So the interpreted languages, they are executed line by line, just like the HTML. When your web browser will read the HTML code, will read the first line, interpret it, and then execute it. The second line will be read by the browser. Oops, the second line having some errors. So the second line will not be executed. The third line, it's a free error, will be interpreted and executed, and so on. So in case if you have like some errors in some lines, this will not affect the other lines. All of the correct instructions or lines will be executed, and the others who has some errors will not executed. As simple as that. But for the compiled languages, all of the program will not be executed if you have like one single error. This is one. Two, the compiled languages, or before the compiled languages, the interpreted languages, the features. One, it's being executed line by line. If some lines has some errors, will simply not be executed and the others will be executed. Now, whenever you need to run the application developed by scripting languages, every time will be executed again from scratch. For the compiled languages, it will not be executed if it has like even one simple error. Once you compile your program, it will generate like an executable file, just like Java. When you compile the Java, it will generate an executable file. And this file could be used many times without being executed again. So we are like compiling the Java program one time and we use it many times. For that JavaScript, every time we need to use it, we need to execute it again from scratch. So generally, these are the differences between the interpreted and the compiled languages. Okay, sometimes we have something called plugins. Do you know what the plugins means? It's like small softwares embedded with the browsers. Like for example, flashing, players, media players, Java files. Now, for example, if you are using Internet Explorer, of course, it will help the browser to display some data. If you are using Internet Explorer, okay, and you tried to access العربية.net, for example, العربية.net is used to display some videos and movies, okay? Now, your browser is not supporting the movies. In this case, it will require you to do what? You cannot display this. You need to install some plugins like Flash or some of the players or Java or VB scripts. So the plugins, it's like a small piece of softwares that's helping the browsers to display different kind of data for you as a client. Okay, now let us back to the forms. طبعا forms in terms of the client side, from the client side. Both HTML and CSS and sometimes XML, they are very frequently used in combination with JavaScript. So can we use the three of these tools together in developing a web page? Can you design a web page using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all together? Yes. Why? Because each one is specialized in a certain area. When it comes to designing the web page, then we are using HTML to define the header, the tables, the banners, and so on. When it comes to define the formatting, the styles, and positioning for the components of that web page, we are using CSS. Okay, now in case if we have some processing, like for example, we are designing a form to collect some data, and then we are do some processing with the data. HTML will not support you to do some processing, to do calculations, or even to do some functions. Rather, you need to use a supported language, and in this case, JavaScript could work. Why we did not ASP.NET, guys? Because we are discussing the client side now. The client side, they're using some light tools like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS only. Okay, so according to this figure, the JavaScript could be used for coding the behavior of that form, the web page. The behavior means the processing. Now, whenever you have like a processing or functions to being done at that page, then this is like the behavior of that page. So in this case, we need to use the JavaScript. When it comes to the presentation and the styling and the formatting, you are using CSS. When it comes to the structure of the page, then you are using HTML or even XHTML. The content, of course, it's like combination of text, images, and any other kind of medias. Okay, for programming the web applications or the web pages of the client side, we are using those tools. The JavaScript is like a programming language and often called by scripting language. So, yeah, I would go with the scripting language rather than programming language because it is a scripting language used to build the web pages only, not the programming to do like some advanced calculations and processing. The JavaScript can be easily embedded inside HTML or XHTML pages and could be integrated to the HTML tags. Why? Because both of them, they are scripting languages, but you can't like embed like a basic code inside HTML. They are not compatible with each other. Okay, one of the good features of JavaScript is that it's natively interpreted by any kind of a browser, regardless to the type of that browser. Computation and actions are being executed on the client side. So if you are using or you are developing the pages on the client side using JavaScript, then you will be able to do some processing. But in case if you developed all of the pages from the client side using HTML only, then you are a thin client and you will not be able to do any kind of processing or calculations. JavaScript is a mainstream, which means that it's recognized as a useful language that could support any kind of processing, and its lifetime is a bit long. So you can't say that JavaScript is obsolete. Now, what do you think? The BASIC and the JavaScript, did they like invented at the same period? Yes. يعني هل تم تطوير واكتشاف الجافا سكريبت والبيسك بنفس الفترة؟ Yes, but the basic now is obsolete, يعني غير مستخدمة, outdated. But for the JavaScript, it is still in use and it will remain used even for the coming decades. ده العقود القادمة. Now, can we insert the JavaScript inside HTML codes? Yes, we can. Do you know how to use JavaScript, guys? Did you still remember the M150A? Good. طبعا here we are not going to go deeply because we told you before, it's not like a programming course. It's just like a web development concepts, the main concepts of the web development. So all what do we need to know here is that from the client side, we can use tools such as XML, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and we come to the fact that these three tools could be embedded inside each other. So your code could include some codes from JavaScript, from HTML, and from CSS. Usually, how we can integrate the JavaScript with HTML? Through three ways. One, you can write a mix of code including HTML. Probably no أمل، على الأغلب لا، ولكن مثل ما حكينا احنا يوم الجمعة القادمة إن شاء الله بيكون في عندنا workshop، طبعا asynchronous workshop على one of the forums. يوم الجمعة إن شاء الله بيكون في عندنا فوريوم مخصص لإعطاء بعض الأمثلة على البروجرام على السكريبتنج languages including ال HTML, XHTML و JavaScript. إنه how to use them and to what extent. طبعا خالد الوركشوب هي مش workshop يعني in its real meaning, it's like discussions على الفوريوم، حيكون مفتوح، حيكون available from يعني Friday after جمعة prayer. So whenever you have the chance to get into LMS, please go ahead and get in and try to read all of the posted topics there. In case if you have any question, you can post your question. In case if you have an answer on one of your colleagues' question, you can answer it and so on. So it's like a discussions, more discussions than workshop. So that's why I will leave this part to the Friday, guys. Here is like an example on a thick client. Here we are like viewing a web page through our browsers. Through this web page, we are like trying to submit an order. We would like to change the flooring of our, for example, of our class. Okay, so here we are displaying some deals of this company that is like showing to us some flooring, wooden flooring, أرضيات خشبية or parquet, and it gives us some information that the pack size اللي هو المربع أو the unit size, this is the size, and the cost for each pack is something. Now you need to enter from your side as a client the area that you need to cover, like for example 5 square meters. So when you submit, your browser will be responsible to calculate the cost. Now simply, what is the cost? Is the size, which is 5, multiplied by the cost for each pack. So 5 by 20, these are 80. So who calculated the 80? Who calculated the cost? You or the server? You, from your side. So do we need to go back to the server to get the results? No need at all. You can do it from your end only. So that's why we call it by a thick client, because you are sharing some part of the processing with the server. This is like the result after you submit from your side, your order cost. So you entered like 4, and the overall cost is 80. The details is like a fees and the values, blah 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 blah, and this is like the total 131. And this is done by using this code. Okay guys, we'll leave this part to the Friday inshallah discussions on the forum. I will dedicate a discussion forums. I will call it by discussions on the scripting languages. So by Friday inshallah, you will have like a discussion forum on scripting languages. It has this name. اوكي شباب، انا اتمنى انه الجميع عمل داونلود للبلوك 1 بلوك 2. حاولوا من هون ليوم الجمعة او ليوم الخميس، احنا قاعدين يوم الخميس، فمن هون ليوم الخميس حاولوا تستثمروا الوقت بقراءة الماتيريال. And inshallah we will continue with each other inshallah next Thursday. ما اعتقد والله يا توفيق اني اكون بكره بالجامعة، ممكن بعد الافطار. بس anyway عندك موبايلي، ممكن تكلمني ونوثق انا وياك ان شاء الله. واجب السؤال الاخير، احنا الان مفترض انه بعد يوم الجمعة نكون ان شاء الله قادرين على حله. سؤال الكودينج بالواجب ان شاء الله بعد يوم الجمعة ممكن نكون قادرين على حله. بس أنا I would advise you all guys to hold on solving the TMA now and focus on the midterm please. مفتوحة يوم الجمعة يا لما، مفتوحة، حيكون عبارة عن discussion forum available all the time. So whenever you have a free time on Friday get into LMS وحتلاقي في discussions already بدأت. So you can read the topics, you can read the discussions, you can ask a question, you can answer one of the questions if you wish. I already sent it to you, Khalid. If you would like, I can share it here, please. Do you want me to share the TMA file here? Okay, the midterms. As I told you, Khalid, inshallah, I will send you previous midterms, inshallah, very soon. I'm in the process of collecting them. مجرد ما جمعت مجموعة بإذن الله تعالى حبعثها لكم جميعا. شاء الله I will do send it by email خالد. تفضل يا لما شو سؤالك؟ نفس المحتوى يا لاما، نفس المحتوى، ما في أي ريدكشن بالصيف، والمحتوى بيكون نفسه. عشان هيك احنا قلنا إنه الصيف بيكون مكثف intensive. لحد علمي عادل أنا أجبت على جميع الإيميلات، ما بعرف إذا أجبت على إيميلك أو لا، ولكن check your mailbox. إذا ما جاك من عندي رد على إيميلك forward it again please. Okay guys أسيبكم في أمان الله. إذا في أي شيء احنا ممكن نتواصل عن طريق الإيميل إن شاء الله. لقاءنا القادم إن شاء الله Thursday 9:30 or 10. Thursday 10 o'clock إن شاء الله. Okay. See you by then. السلام عليكم.